Hi, in this video I'm going to show you a very neat trick around tool calling. This is called tool calling injection, and it can save you a lot of tokens. So the best way to show it is to show a demo. So here I have some code. I will show it after the fact. And I can either go into normal tool mode or injection tool mode. So let me just jump into normal mode. And what we'll see here is we have an agent that have 15 different tools. It has some time tools, it has some file tools, and it has a weather tool. All of these tools are from my agent framework toolkit that you can get for free if you need to, so you don't need to make them yourself. But the important thing is there's a lot of tools. And the drawback of a lot of tools is that if we, for example, just say hi, we end up spending 547 tokens on that. And if I say hello again, I don't have session on, so it will be exactly the same. But of course, if we then say, what is the time? The agent will use a tool and get back, in this case, UTC time. Or what is the weather like in Paris? We see that it calls that tool, and it spent more tokens because now it needs both the schema, the tool call, the call back and forward, and then ending up spending a lot of tokens. So let's see that same scenario with the same tools, but in injection mode. And again, I will come to the code. If we go into injection mode, we now have an agent that has 0 tools. We are not giving it anything. And if we say hi, oops, move the breakpoint so we can see. It says that it injected 0 tools and it just used 8 input tokens instead of the 500 something. And if we say hello, it still stay that way. But if we say what is the time, it will on the fly inject 2 tools and then let the agent use them on the fly. And now it uses more tokens, but not all 15 tools were loaded, only 2 of them. And in the same manner, we can go in and say, what is the weather like in Paris? And the 2 different tools were removed, and now we injected only the get weather tool, and we ended up with an answer using only 400 tokens, which is less than the 15 tools in total. So let's see how this is done. So up here I have a little switch between normal and tool injection, and the normal is a quite normal thing. We just get the tools again, grab the agent framework toolkit.tools NuGet package if you just want them, else make some tools that you want. I put in 2 tools here with the time tools. I put in a bunch of tools for file system tools here, and I put in the weather tool here. And then I do a normal client and a normal agent, in this case ChatGPT 4.1, and I give it the 15 tools. And I just show them out in visual, but else this is completely normal, but no session or thread. So that makes sense. We give it the tools every time. We need to use the 500 something tokens every time we just give any kind of request to the agent. Tool injection, on the other hand, does it a bit different in that we are now using 2 agents. We have a tool injection agent, and I'm using a very cheap model here because we want it to be fast. And we have a made agent that doesn't get any tools, but instead we use the AI context provider factory. We used this previously in memory as well, but in essence, what it can do is we can on the fly react before something happens, before a message is sent to the LLM, and on the fly inject instructions and tools. And that is what we're doing here. So beyond that, it just says it has 0 tools because we don't give it any. And we have this down here. But the important thing is this on-the-fly injection context. So in that, we have an invoking async that we can react to. And let me take a breakpoint here so we can see in action what is actually going on. So let me start the tool again and go into interactive mode. And we are not hitting the breakpoint yet because it first happens when we ask something. So let's just say hi. And if we do that, we get an invoking context. And in that, we get the message that we have just sent, meaning hi. And what we do here is we just use the injection agent. Let me jump one thing here. So it's essentially doing a tool call, not a tool call, LLM call, but with the lowest amount of agent and just the same message before we actually give it for real to the real agent. So we essentially said hi, and we are using structured output to ask, based on this, is this a file system tool? Does it need file system tool to answer this question? Does it need time tools, or does it need weather tools in order to answer? And its instructions up here were your job is to tell if the given message is requested to use specific tools. And in our case here, because we just said hi, the response back, as we can see down here, is no, we didn't need the file system tools, we didn't need the time tools, we didn't need the weather tools. And because we don't do that, we end up with this code. I will go through it when we actually use it. But we end up saying, no, we don't want any new tools, we don't want any new instructions, and we just give context back that is injected on the fly into the main agent. And because of that, it doesn't use anything. But if we say, what is the weather like in Paris? Oh, I removed the breakpoint. Let's do it again. So there we go. So now the context is still only what we just sent. What is the weather like in Paris? And we're using the tool injection agent here to check the tool result if there's any of them that, based on that message, sounds like something to be about time, weather, or files. And if we do that, we get a response back here, where it comes back that says, yes, we don't need file tools, we need time tools. We don't need time tools, but we need weather tools, because it can see that's what we are after. And then we just use some if statements here. So we don't need time tools, so we don't inject those tools on the fly. We don't need file system tools, so we don't inject those on the fly. But we need weather tools, so we go in and inject those on the fly. So this is just newing up the tool, just like you would in a normal agent before you would use it and give it to it all the time. So we have one tool now, which is our get weather for city. We give that into the system. In other places, for example, in the file system tool, I'm also giving custom instructions on the fly, so they can also be injected, giving what folder it's allowed to work with. But if we do this, the tool was like if we had written the agent and only giving that tool next time, only giving what is the time. So now we instead get back, we need time tools, but doesn't need file system tools and weather tools. And in that way, we can on the fly inject those two tools, the get now and UTC. We can skip the others and only injecting those tools. So this way you can really save a lot of tokens by doing this. And it's quite simple because, again, you have a limited amount of tools normally. And yes, could it go wrong if we talk about what are the files on the JFK murder? We do that, we will see probably that it thinks it needs file tools because it cannot know what files it is. But it's not like we are now it's trying to find some files on JFK, but that's okay. But in this case, that is not what we want, of course. So in that regard, that would just be normal instructions on what it is. But in this case, we don't want anything about the tools and the files. So it's not a bulletproof thing, but the worst thing that can happen is that we end up wasting a few more tokens sometimes, while saving in 99% of all the times where the tool gets it right. Of course, it can also get it wrong, and then it will fail. So there is some kind of fail-safe mechanism in that we can end up with it forget to include the tool, but it could just as easily forget to call the tool. So that is how you do it. Again, you set up, we have it, the contact provider. We do the injection, and on the fly, we use an agent in here instead of just the main agent to get what we need, and on the fly, give it back AI context before the real LLM call. So really cool trick, a really good way of saving a lot of tokens. See you in the next one.